let us already at this point return to Visual Studio and start adding routing to the application. Now I owe you an explanation. So far, I haven't explained how /pi/list got us to this page. Well, I'm going to show you that in this demo and will add more navigation to our application. So let's do that. If we look at our program.cs, notice that we have this map default controller route. That is a piece of middleware that sits at the far end, that is actually endpoint middleware, and it will add support for routing to controller and controller actions. It uses for that the default controller route. The default controller route in ASP.NET Core MVC is this one. It will basically match with a pattern where first we have the controller, then we have the action, and then optionally we have an ID parameter. There's also some defaults which are used in this default controller route as well. So when we navigated to pi/list, well, pi went in the controller part and list went into the action part. And so when I hit enter in my browser, a request is sent and it's intercepted by this middleware, and that will then forward the request to the action method list on the Pi controller. That's how /pi/list got us to executing the code here in this list method. Now we are going to extend the application and bring in a couple of other pages. And for that, we'll of course need navigation. While we're here in the Pi controller, we now have the overview of all Pis. I'm going to add a method, a new action method, that is the details action method. So we'll do that together. We'll bring in the public iActionResult details. And details is a new action method which is typically going to return the view containing the details of a selected Pi. Therefore, this method will accept a parameter. I'm going to call that ID. Somehow the ID that is passed through a URL will need to end up in this ID value here. That will happen again through that default controller route that we now have specified here. In here, I'm going to write code that gets from the Pi repository the Pi by ID, passing in, of course, the ID that's passed into the method. It could be that someone is trying to access a Pi that doesn't exist, and therefore our getPi by ID will give us back null. If that is the case, then we will return not found. Not found is a method like view here that is defined on the controller base, and it will just return a not found result, basically saying a 404. Let's hope that the user passes in a correct ID, and then we can return view passing in the found Pi. That's again a strongly typed view that we're returning here, containing the Pi as its data. Now we need to be in the flow to create the correct view. We have worked on the Pi controller and we've created the details action method. So in the Pis folder, I'm going to now add a new view. I'm going to go here to web, select Razor View Empty. Since we created the details action method, I need to create the details view. And let's again remove the default generated code and bring in our own code. Our view was receiving here a Pi, which is a Pi instance. So that means that the model for this view will indeed be a Pi. I don't need to fully qualify that because in the view imports, I had already brought in support for the using statement for models as well. I'll bring in some more code here that will then display the name of the Pi, as well as the image, short description, long description, and the price. With that in place, let's already run things at this point. And this time, we'll navigate to Pi/details, because that's our new action method, and I'll pass in a valid ID. I think 7 exists. Let's see. There we go, blueberry cheesecake, looks nice. And we see the detail page containing the image, the name, and the long and the short description, as well as the price. This is how routing got us to this page. Now, as said, this is all thanks to that middleware component that is doing all the hard work of pointing the request to the actual action on a controller. We could in fact do this ourselves instead of using the default. I can replace this with app.map controller route, passing in the name of the route and then the pattern. But as you see, I'm using here the pattern that is used also by the default. Now it is of course possible also to define more than just one route. But for our application, we will keep it simple. We will actually be writing our application use this default entirely.